Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Samantha Laws, and I am a sophomore in the School of Nursing. Health and human science researchers are taking giant leaps to improve lives in Indiana and around the globe. Thank you for joining us for the fifth in the series of HHS Learn and Lunch presentation during Purdue's 150th anniversary year-long celebration. And a special welcome to our online audience. The College of Health and Human Science is grateful for the HHS Alumni Board's contribution to this program. I am pleased to introduce today's presenters. Dr. Regan Bailey is an associate professor of nutrition science. Her research lab focuses on improving the methods of measuring nutritional status to optimize health. They focus efforts on understanding how to use dietary intakes, dietary patterns, and biomarkers of nutritional status to assess how dietary exposure relates to human health across the lifespan. Prior to academic life, Dr. Bailey was a nutritional epidemiologist and director of career development and outreach at the Office of Dietary Supplements, Office of Dietary Prevention at National Institute of Health. Dr. Libby Richards is an associate professor in the School of Nursing. Dr. Richards' research efforts focus on understanding and intervening of the individual, interpersonal, and environment influences on physical activity behavior. She also focuses on population-based physical activity promotion and the importance of external support for increasing physical activity. Dr. Richards serves in several leadership positions in the field of public health, including as a board member of the Indiana Public Health Association and past member of American Public Health Association Action Board. She is one of 7 individuals hired by Purdue to promote research across disciplines in public health. We hope you enjoy this presentation.
And in the interest of full disclosure, Libby and I are best friends. So we love what we do because we're so passionate about it, but we really enjoy working together. So it's a real treat for both of us to be here with you today. So the number of older adults in America is increasing as our baby boomers start to turn 65. In fact, every 65-year-old that is alive right now, about 1 in 4 will reach the age of 90. And if you ask older adults, what is the one thing that you are afraid of as you enter this phase of your life? Number 1 is that I'm going to lose my mind, and number 2 is I'm going to lose my sight. And so what we are really interested in is how can we prevent or slow cognitive decline? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Some people like to blame everything on your genes. Well, you can blame your parents for some things, but interestingly, the lifestyle that you lead also has a substantial impact on your health, not only cognitive function, but all areas of chronic disease. So it's your environment and your lifestyle. Some people say their genes load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So it's not one or the other, it's the interaction of all these things. Cognitive function, just so that we're all on the same page, is this set of mental processes that is very multidimensional, which makes it very hard for people to study, because what will affect memory may be very different than what will affect attention. And so this is an area that is very, very hard to research. We're going to be talking about mild cognitive impairment today. So that is when people can still perform their activities of daily living, but they notice that they are forgetful, or there are certain things that they know aren't functioning like they used to. The spectrum ranges all the way from mild cognitive impairment to full-blown dementia. So Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. There are 16 million people living with mild cognitive impairment in the United States, and Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death. In fact, every minute someone gets Alzheimer's disease in this country. So the facts are this is an aging population, and this is a serious public health problem. Currently, there's no treatment, so prevention is the key. There are some non-modifiable factors that we just can't change that are related to cognitive function. Age, age, age. That's the biggest factor to predict. Mainly because aging is associated with other chronic diseases like hypertension or high cholesterol. Structural changes in the brain start to occur around age 40 in both humans and non-human primates, such that gray matter starts to degrade. And this results in a loss of episodic memory. So why I say non-human primates is because this was originally thought to be a very stressful time in your life. And so of course you're being forgetful because you're managing children and parents and job stress. But the same thing happens in non-human primates. So it's a structural change in the brain. And episodic memory is one of the dimensions, like where did you park your car this morning? How many times do you walk into the garage and you're like, oh, I thought it was right here, and it's not. This happened to my husband at the airport once. He swore he was on 2, and we went there, and someone stole the car because, the confidence that, clearly someone stole the car because I couldn't have made a mistake, right? So this is the type of memory that starts to decline in your 40s regardless. Educational attainment, so people who have higher educations are less likely to have cognitive deficits in older adulthood. Women are more likely than men to develop dementia, Alzheimer's, and mild cognitive impairment. We talked about genetics, specifically ApoE4. So this is neither necessary nor sufficient to have Alzheimer's disease. And what that means is if you have this, it doesn't mean you will get it. And you might get this if you don't have this gene, okay? But about 30 to 60% of memory is heritable. And this is data from a few twin studies. So fun fact, Dr. Libby Richards is a twin. And her mom is here in the audience. They were in no way involved with these twin studies, but I just think it's a fun fact. All right, so let's talk about what we can do. We can't change our genes, but we can, not smoke. We can be physically active, and the second half of this presentation is going to really focus on that, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. And also through diet. So I will tell you, people spend their careers researching this. So I'm going to try to talk to you in the next 10 minutes. I'm going to try to synthesize everything I know about these specific topics, because I would say these are the ones where the most research is currently available. So what we're going to talk about first is a systematic review. So instead of showing you study after study after study, I'm going to show you a systematic review. That is a whole bunch of studies that are put together and meta-analyzed. So this is data from 14 different clinical trials in about 30,000 people. So if you give B vitamins to people who are healthy in their 60s and follow them, does that appear to have any effect? And the answer is no. There's a lot of biological plausibility about why B vitamins would be involved with cognitive function, but giving B vitamins in a dietary supplement does not seem to impact cognitively healthy people. And this is called a forest plot. So this is just showing you all of the studies, and there's all of different lengths of time because there's 17 different trials. So this is a way to visually summarize what I told you. For people, some people like to see the data, some people just want it in a tweet, okay? So in a tweet, there is little or no effect on maintaining global function for healthy people. In people with mild cognitive impairment, there's a smaller number of trials available, little or no effect, but that more research is needed. And I'm going to show you one of the trials because it's particularly promising. It's called the VitaCog trial. This is from David Smith's group at Oxford. He was interested in people who already had mild cognitive impairment. If we give them B vitamins and follow them over time, what will happen. So he had about 271 people, folic acid, B12, and B6 for 2 years. And they not only did a battery of questionnaires, but they also looked at their brains. Okay, so this is compelling data because we have multiple measures. So over 2 years, people who were treated with B vitamins had a slower rate of brain atrophy. So bad news is everybody's brain's getting smaller every year by a little bit. So there's nothing we can do about that. So that's atrophy. But in people who took the B vitamins, there was a slower rate of atrophy. It didn't stop the atrophy. Nothing's going to stop the atrophy, but it slowed the rate of it. And so this is just looking at volumetric scans of the brain, and you'll see this beautiful blue in the middle is actually where the brain is shrinking. Okay, so in the people who didn't receive B vitamins, they lost about 2.5% over the course of this trial, whereas in the B vitamin group, it was about 0.5%. When you look at memory tests, so this is the Hopkins Verbal Learning Test, you will see that it really depended, and this is one of the take-home messages. So if you give vitamins or minerals to someone who's already adequate, it's very unlikely that there will be a huge demonstrable improvement in anything. But if you give vitamins and minerals to someone who is inadequate, it will be effective. And so this is stratifying people by whether or not they had high homocysteine. So homocysteine is high in the blood when your B vitamins are low. So in the people who had high homocysteine at the beginning of the trial, there was a substantial effect for their episodic memory. And remember, that's the one that we're all screwed on, right? So this is exciting data. So these are the regions of the brain that were specifically affected by B vitamins. And you'll see the ones that have the asterisks are the regions that show early atrophy in Alzheimer's disease. So this is exciting data. Again, this is a small study. Much more data is needed, but it's exciting. They also had a less conversion to dementia. So that's what I told you in a tweet, plus some more text. But again, this only happened in people that had the high homocysteine, so people who had low B vitamins at the beginning of the trial. This didn't work for everyone. All right, let's go through those other ones really quickly so we have enough time to talk about physical activity. Antioxidants. These are nutrients that protect from free radical damage and include beta-carotene, vitamin C, vitamin E, selenium, zinc, and copper. In a nutshell, years and years of literature, small benefits of cognitive function after about 10 years of beta-carotene supplementation and at about 5 to 10 years of vitamin C supplementation. Very little effect for vitamin E, selenium, zinc, or copper. So we have all these different vitamins and minerals. Researchers are trying to find out what's the best combination, what should we be using? And so a lot of the studies are using different combinations, so it's really hard to disentangle the effects of any one nutrient over the other. What about vitamin D? So I'm showing you this study because it's longitudinal. And that's very important because a lot of these are trials where you recruit people and you say, you take this supplement and you take this fake supplement, and then we'll see what happens. This is a longitudinal observational study. So it followed people over time without an intervention, just to see what was going on with vitamin D. And this is another important point. Again, you'll see these are different trajectories of change in different dimensions. So episodic memory and executive memory all decline faster in people who were vitamin D deficient at the start. And you'll see this nice, what we call a dose-response relationship. So people who were adequate in vitamin D did the best. So remember, nobody's gaining with cognitive function. We're just trying to maintain. So that's the nice orange line. You're either maintaining or more slowly declining. And then the insufficient, so somewhere between sufficient and deficient was in the mid-range, okay? This is a question that I get asked all the time. Well, I love wine. And so people are always asking me, you know, you're a dietitian. Should I drink wine? Should I drink beer? Should I not drink at all? The jury is really out on alcohol, especially with regard to cognition. So I'm just going to show you two studies. This is one of about 550 community-dwelling older women and men who were followed for 30 years. So you can imagine the flaws in this kind of research study. They're just tracking them and asking them, what did you do? If someone asks you these questions, you may or may not remember. There's lots of holes in this type of study design, but it's a great natural experiment because we can look at how humans actually change over time. And so they divided people into these alcohol use categories. These are their words, not mine. So if you consume more than 14 units per week, I'm not going to call you a high consumer. What I will tell you, though, is those high consumers had the most hippocampal atrophy. So remember, we're losing brain tissue. And the hippocampus is what's really important for memory. And you can see this dose-dependent fashion, so this stepwise. The more alcohol, the more hippocampal atrophy. And what's interesting is there's not much difference in some of the categories, but the take home from this is the highest consumers had the most atrophy. I will show you another study. This is about 3,000 community-dwelling older adults without dementia, and they followed them for 6 years to look at their alcohol intake with incident dementia. So they didn't have dementia at the start. We'll follow you for 6 years. And these are what the drinking categories were. So what was interesting is at baseline, people who had mild cognitive impairment, any drinking made them worse. But if you didn't have mild cognitive impairment at baseline, moderate drinking was associated with about a 40% risk of dementia. So when people say, tell me what's the take home? Well, it depends. It depends on where you are, and it depends on what your baseline status is for a lot of these things. So you can see how complicated it is for nutrition professionals to answer some of these questions. Is there anyone here who has not heard of omega-3 fatty acids? This is the hot thing, okay? Studies have consistently shown that fish intake is associated with better cognitive health. So as scientists, we want to take what we think are the bioactive components in that fish, omega-3 fatty acids, put them in a pill, and then we're going to make everybody better, right? We want it quick and fast and easy. Well, it turns out that, and really, unless you're an infant, omega-3 supplements don't do much for cognitive function. A little bit for attention in adults, but really the benefit is only seen in infants. Like I said, it's more consistent evidence from epidemiological studies that show fish is what is important. And that's what I'd like to leave you with today, is this construct of your overall dietary pattern. There is no magic bullet, taking this supplement or that supplement. Your diet is really where you can make some improvements. There's been consistent evidence that a Mediterranean type diet, this is very similar to a DASH diet. This is a diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins. You'll see that the top of the pyramid is sweet, so not a lot of really sweet, sugary types of food, and wine and water you'll see on the side. This is a picture from when I was traveling to a Mediterranean country. This is what you see when you go to a restaurant. It doesn't get any more farm to table than this, right? But what you'll notice in being in these countries is that people enjoy eating with one another. They sit down, there's conversation, there's socialization, there's time to eat. Wine is enjoyed, but not to excess. So this is a whole type of lifestyle and a pattern that can really be effective for multiple diseases of public health concern, but specifically for what we're talking about today. So I know you want a magic bullet, but this is what dietitians say over and over and over again: balance, variety, and moderation. I was giving a talk to some preschoolers at Ben and Maxine Miller, and they said, well, tell me what to eat. And I said, eat a rainbow. Make sure all the things you eat are colorful, fruits and vegetables. When I said eat a rainbow, one kid said, Skittles. I was like, no, that's taste the rainbow. I'm talking about eating the rainbow. So just want to reiterate, fruits and vegetables, not Skittles, okay? So we're talking about these giant leaps, but what I would encourage you to take away from what I say is very small steps can make a huge impact in your health. You eat 3 times a day, maybe more. Make small changes in portion size. Try incorporating more fruits and vegetables, replacing sugar-sweetened beverages with water or low-fat milk. Small steps add up over time. And with that, I would like to introduce my dear friend and esteemed colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Richards, to talk to you about the other side of the equation.
Thank you. Okay, so we heard about nutritional intake, energy intake. Now let's talk about energy expenditure. And I am a handsy person, so if this starts to screw up because I'm moving it, just give me a cue. So we're gonna start with the punchline. When we talk about physical activity, some is better than none, but more is better. And you are going to hear a very consistent message from me. Physical activity is one of the most important things that you can do for overall health. We know that people who are physically active feel better, they have better physical function, they have better mental function, they have a reduced risk of chronic disease. And we'll talk about some of those examples. Unfortunately, even though we know it's good for us, we are still relatively sedentary. So this is national level data. It is based on self-report. So that is a limitation, because if you ask people how active they are, you're gonna get an inflated answer. When you put monitors on people, we see that really about 3 to 5% of US adults meet physical activity guidelines. When you ask them without monitoring them, about 30% of US adults say that they're meeting physical activity guidelines, which is still drastically low. So let's look at it positively. I look at this as we have plenty of room for improvement, and we'll talk about how we can do that. But I'd like to just take a minute to ask you guys to stand right now. If you're able, please humor me. You may stand as long as you would like. You can sit whenever you're ready. But sitting is literally the new smoking. So studies show you can go to the gym, but if you go home then and are sedentary for the rest of the time, meaning sitting at a desk, watching TV, you might as well smoke a cigarette, because sitting literally has similar outcomes as being a smoker. It outweighs any physical activity that you do during the day if you don't break up your period of sedentary time. So think about it while we're at work. Think about it when you're, in presentations and so forth. Stand up. I stand up during my faculty meetings all the time, and I'm starting to slowly get other people to do it. My students are going to stand up. I teach at 1:30. They know now, like 20 minutes into lecture, they might as well just start standing, because I'm going to make them stand anyway. So you're welcome to sit whenever you'd like to, but you can stay standing. We're going to talk about physical activity guidelines, so I want you to know what that is. So in 2008 are when our national guidelines came out. They were just refreshed this past year. To meet physical activity guidelines is a lot, folks. 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity each week, 2.5 hours, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity, or some type of combination of both. So this isn't something that you just do on Saturday or on Sunday. This is a lifestyle. And we also have to do some muscle strengthening activities as well. If you're over the age of 60, there's some specific guidelines that say if you're not able to get in 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity, get in as much as you can. When you're talking about intensity, judge it into relation of your current level of fitness and then start to gradually do more when you're able to. And don't forget about balance. So the older we get, balance becomes more and more important. So think about incorporating balance and other stretching activities as well. So why do we care about physical activity? Why do I talk about it so much? The science is so strong about the benefits of a physically active lifestyle. It reduces your chance of gaining weight and can assist with weight loss. It reduces your risk of falls. It improves your mental health and reduces signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety. It increases your muscular strength. It reduces your risk of pretty much every chronic disease that we're concerned about, and also early death. But chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, breast cancer, colon cancer, endometrial cancer, stomach cancer, esophageal cancer, bladder cancer, kidney cancer. Come on now. So when Regan said that there isn't a magic pill, there isn't from a diet perspective, but ladies and gentlemen, physical activity is literally the only fountain of youth you will ever have the opportunity to get to. Being physically active is our fountain of youth, and that's just how important it is.
She's 85.
Yeah, my mom's 120. I love you. So we're going to specifically talk about a few studies related to cognitive decline and physical activity. So we'll start with some older studies, and then we'll see where we end up. So in 2001, we saw a couple studies come out. The first one showed that patients who had less physical activity and less intellectual activity, so that's social activity and challenging your mind, had a 250% increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. Another study from 2001 broke individuals into clusters of activity. Those who had the high levels of activity had 60% reduced risk of getting cognitive impairment. And these last two studies are really important because this is where we start to see the dose-response relationship that Dr. Bailey had mentioned. So the more active people were, the more active people were, the less likely they were to get cognitive impairment. So some is better than none, but more is better. So then again, we continue into 2009. This study followed people for 14 years. So this is one of those observational longitudinal studies that we were talking about. And people who had higher physical activity levels, independent of other things, so independent of smoking, independent of diet, people who had high physical activity levels had a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease. So physical activity, when we're talking about cognitive health, is extremely important. We see in 2012 that physical activity reduced the risk of cognitive impairment by any cause, not just Alzheimer's disease, by 60%. And now it gets exciting, folks. So last year there was a meta-analysis published. So 33 studies were compiled and looked at together. And what they found from the 36 studies, what they found was that people who are physically active and who exercise actually can improve their cognitive function. So where you're at now, you could get better. But there were some caveats to that. So those studies, for exercise to be considered having the ability to improve your cognitive function, it has to be at least moderate intensity, and you need to do it for a longer duration. So it needs to be 40 to 60 minutes in duration. So we talk a lot about 10-minute walks. Those are still good. but there's something about a longer duration that is leading to this improved cognitive function. And you can't just do it once. Like, one time is good, but it's a lifestyle. Then also last year, this study showed that older adults with a family history of Alzheimer's disease, and also those who were carriers of the APOE4, so these are high-risk folks, if they were physically active, they had reduced risk of cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. So not only is there a dose-response relationship, meaning more is better, it also is beneficial for high-risk groups, which is also very important. So we have two hot-off-the-press studies. So this first one came out in January. This was a study where they followed people for an extended period of time to the point that they died. And then they looked at their brains. So that's pretty solid science there. And what they found is people who had higher levels of total physical activity and had good motor function, so good balance, good muscle tone, that was independently associated with better cognition. So again, controlling for other lifestyle things such as smoking, alcohol, and diet. And then just last week, I saw an intervention study came across my email that I wanted to share with you. So this was an intervention study. Younger to middle-aged folks either did stretching 4 times a week or aerobic exercise 4 times a week. And the aerobic exercise group improved their executive function. We care about executive function. So aerobic exercise 4 times a week improved executive function, and it was moderated by age. So the older the people were, the better benefits they had in their executive function. So not only, I think the science clearly shows that exercise can reduce your risk of cognitive decline, but it also now looks like it can also improve your current level of cognitive functioning and memory. So that's a pretty big deal from an exercise standpoint. Now I hope you're excited. I'm easily excited. And so when I talk about physical activity, I get super excited because I think I want to spend a few minutes to just talk to you guys about what are some things that you can do to take where you're at now and get a little bit better. So we're going to just talk about some practical strategies. And I think it makes sense so you're all on the same page. I've said moderate intensity activity a lot. What does that mean? So moderate intensity activity is considered brisk walking, 2.5 to 4 miles per hour. You don't necessarily need to have a speedometer to figure out how fast you're going. Some characteristics of knowing whether or not your activity is brisk or moderate intensity. You should develop a light sweat in around 10 minutes. Your breathing should increase. Your heart rate should increase. You should still be able to have a conversation. So you can go on a walk with a friend and have a conversation. That's totally great. However, if you can bust out into your favorite show tune during that walk, you need to kick it up a notch. So you can talk, but not sing. If you can sing on your walk, you need to walk faster. But otherwise, it's considered moderate intensity. And also keep in mind that we're talking about our muscles and muscular strength as well. So that is looking at free weights or resistance bands. So if you're ever in the School of Nursing, I have these in my office. And sometimes you just do some exercises. The bottom line is you do not need to join a gym to increase your physical activity at all. You can get resistance bands, have them at your desk. You can stand up while you're at work. You can go for a walk, take your phone calls on your cell phone and walk during your meetings. We're going to talk a little bit about walking. That's where my main research area is. It's the easiest activity for anybody to do. You need a decent pair of shoes, not even a $100 pair of shoes, and somewhere where you can walk. So it's pretty feasible. I think changing physical activity behavior is doable, and we're going to talk about a little bit more how to do that. But before you think about changing your behavior, I think it's good to know where you're at right now. So try to figure out where you're at by the numbers so you know where you need to go. We hear that physical activity, it's a magical 10,000 steps. That's a good goal. Science is starting to show that you may not actually need 10,000 steps. That might not be the best marker, but to give you an idea, 2,000 steps is about a mile. So you can look at your phone. If you carry your phone with you at most times and you have a smartphone, they have us under the health app, which everyone's phone has a health app. You maybe just don't realize it. It has a step counter in it. So if you just carry it with you for the day, you can see how many steps you're getting and know where you want to go from there. You can get a pedometer on Amazon if you want to. Bottom line is just try to figure out where you're at, because it feels really good when you can see the improvements that you can make. So our National Physical Activity Guidelines breaks activity patterns into 4. So an inactive person is someone who gets no moderate to vigorous activity every day. They just do their normal activities of daily living, like laundry, showering, cooking, cleaning. Someone is classified as insufficiently active if they get some moderate to vigorous activity, but they don't meet guidelines. And then an active person is meeting guidelines, which is that 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity, or highly active is someone who is superseding that. That's Regan and I. We were at the gym at 5 o'clock this morning, so if she starts to sleep during this, it's because we're really actually tired. So when we talk about physical activity, as I said, you don't need to join a gym to change your physical activity. There's 4 S's you can think about every day, and if you can do these things, it's gonna make a difference. And I totally promise you, I am a healthcare professional. You can trust me. If you keep track of your steps and figure out how to get more steps in, it's gonna make a difference. If you can take the stairs instead of an elevator, it's gonna make a difference. If you sit less, move more is the bottom line. And then sneak in some regular exercise when you can. And regular exercise can be a brisk walk. I know it's crummy outside, but all of our buildings are pretty big. If you have 10 or 15 minutes, just walk a lap around Stewart Center. There's plenty of stairs. I mean, no one's gonna be like, what are they doing? It's really that doable. And avoid sedentary time. Sedentary time is what's gonna take us out. So avoid sedentary time as much as possible. Now, if I ask any one of you, I'm sure you could come up with 5 to 10 barriers or reasons that we're not physically active. So let's talk about those. We know that there's not enough time in the day, but if you make your physical activity time flexible, it becomes much more manageable. So think about being active in 10-minute chunks. If you look at your calendar, you can probably find where you've got 10 or 15 minutes each workday where you can walk or go do something. And don't beat yourself up if you can't do it a day. Try to do more the next day. But don't save it all for the weekend, because by the time we get to Saturday and Sunday, we're not going to want to get 150 minutes of walking in. Find a buddy. If you're motivated by social support, find somebody that'll help hold you accountable. If you follow Purdue Exercises Medicine on Twitter, they are doing walks around campus at least weekly and maybe more. So if that is a motivator for you, please join them for your walks. Find a dog. Go to the shelter and walk a shelter dog. I have not met a dog that is going to say no to a walk. And so that is a very good motivator. But bottom line is, I think we need to adjust our perspective. So physical activity is not extracurricular. It shouldn't be something that only happens in your leisure time. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to breathe, we have to move. Our bodies were made to move. So if you change your perspective, I mean, we all figure out how to get our sleep in, right? So you just change your perspective. You just figure out how to get your physical activity in. And set realistic goals. So no one has to go from being inactive to being at the top of the pyramid in a month, because any change is better than no change. So start at trying to get 30 minutes of walking in. and then do that for 4 weeks, and then try to get 45 minutes in a week, and then do that for 4 weeks, and then try to get 60 minutes in, and eventually you're going to get there. I am a freak about my calendar, so if you live by your calendar, try putting walk in your calendar, because I love to delete things from my calendar. People send me meeting requests and I will be like sitting in a meeting with them, and then I delete it because I'm doing it. And so I do the same thing with activity. And so if you see something on a calendar and that's your time, try putting a walk or some type of exercise in your calendar. I start my day with stretches and I end my day with stretches like 7 a.m., 7 p.m. And I love to delete it, and I know that I'm gonna do it. And so figure out what works for you and just give it a go. But there's more than just diet and physical activity, and Dr. Bailey touched on this. So physical activity is important, our nutrition is important, but social health is just as important. Studies are showing that social health is just as important as not smoking, as being physically active. So you can figure out ways that you can be active with other people, and that's an extra bang for your buck, but we have to work our minds as well. So puzzles, stimulating conversations, and so forth. And this ties into the last 2 points that we wanted to talk about. So when we talk about a lifestyle for the ages, we got to end by talking about blue zones. So this came out around 2005 from a National Geographic article. Blue zones are pockets around the world where people live substantially longer than in other areas. And not only do they live substantially longer, they have a very high quality of life, because we don't want to just live long, we want to have a great quality of life while we're living long. And so they've studied these areas, and this is what they've found. So in general, to have not only a long life, but a high quality of life, these are things you can do. Figure out how to manage your stress. Figure out how to relax. It doesn't have to be meditation or yoga. It could be, but just what works for you. It may be as simple as taking deep breaths before you go off the deep end. I take a lot of deep breaths. I think my kids know, because I'm like, they're like, we better sit down. Have a sense of purpose. So figure out what it is that motivates you or keeps you energized or keeps you going, and help keep that front and center. Plant slant. Eat more plant-based food than meat-based food. That will take you a long way, actually. Enjoy a glass of wine. A glass of wine. So one of the papers that I read said that in moderation it's good, like a glass a day, but you can't save up your glasses throughout the week. So if you don't drink on Monday and Tuesday, that does not mean Wednesday gets 3 glasses. It just doesn't, unfortunately. The science is there. People who focus on family have shown to have extended life periods. People who stop eating when they're 80% full instead of when they feel like it's coming out of their mouth. So 80% and stop. Move naturally, figure out how to actively transport to places, walk to places instead of jumping in your car. Finding the right tribe. I've got a tribe like nobody's business in West Lafayette, and so finding a social connection is huge. And so it's, as you can see, it's a lifestyle. None of the things that we talked about today is do this or do this. It's literally how you look at your whole frame of reference with your life. But our takeaway messages are cognitive impairment and cognitive decline does happen. We can do some things we can't control. We do know if we control our blood pressure, our blood sugar, our cholesterol, if we limit nicotine, use alcohol in moderation, and are physically active, those are the best things we can do to try to limit cognitive decline, and to also not forget about the importance of social health as well. So I think we have some time for questions if anybody has them. Come on up. Oh! I have something else. Angie, you're going to love this. So Extension has some really great handouts about being active, and so I have some copies. They have, I think, 6 different lessons. The Extension store is freely available online, and working with Cooperative Extension is like the best thing I've ever done. So this first lesson is about doing a walking routine. Then they have another lesson about lower body strength, and it's using resistance bands. And then they have an upper body strength one as well with resistance bands. So you're welcome to take these. And if we run out, they are totally online, so everyone can have one for our folks in the online audience. Questions? Do you need a microphone? Probably.
We'll just pick it up when we need it.
I'm just curious to know, the two of you have always had this type of a lifestyle from the time you were younger. Is it something that was incorporated as you were a child, or did you grow into it?
I apologize, Mom, if you're watching. I didn't know what vegetables were until I went to college. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, which is not that different than this part of Indiana. It was very much meat and potatoes, and so I kind of grew into a healthy eating lifestyle in college when I realized, oh, I can make different choices. And so I've raised my children really differently than the way that I was raised. And my oldest is 21, and she's had 1 soda in her life, and that's not because it's something I kept for her, but because I've shown her like how delicious milk actually tastes, how good water is, that she doesn't have a preference for it. Now the wheels kind of fell off with my younger kids because they're like, I want to live on French fries. But you know, if you make a concerted effort to set up an environment, it really helps in making the right food choices. And I don't know about you, about
Well,
your
actually,
physical
you do.
activity lifestyle.
I think I've been pretty active my whole life, but I also grew up in the age where kids weren't on screens. We were outside playing with our friends, so that's a little bit different. I will say I think I took about a 10-year hiatus where I wasn't active when I was getting my PhD, when I was out of college. In the past few years, I'm in the best shape of my life now, and I'm almost 40. So you can do it whenever. It doesn't have to be in your 20s.
I will say when I met Dr. Richards, she told me she couldn't run. She completed a marathon last year in 8.5-minute miles. So when she talks about making a goal and small steps towards health, she's walking the walk, no pun intended.
I've heard about the plant-based whole foods diet. How familiar are you with that, and can you say more about it?
Yeah, so a plant-based diet is pretty much been a hallmark of nutrition guidance over time. There are studies looking at the Seventh-day Adventists, which are a religious group that are largely vegetarian, and consistent data that there's lower risk of certain types of cardiovascular disease with following a largely vegetarian-based diet. Plenty of health benefits. Whenever you eliminate entire food groups from your diet, though, there are certain nutrients of concern. So for people who are strict vegans, we worry about B12 and iron. So when we have cases like that, we recommend supplementation for anyone who is not consuming a variety of different foods.
This is probably a good follow-up question from Facebook Live. Susan asks, I follow a ketogenic lifestyle. What are your thoughts? Have you talked with the Verda folks here at Purdue? She's a Verda member, and her health insurance has paid for it. Great program.
Hi, Susan. Yeah, I don't think you can be on Purdue campus without seeing the Verda posters. I think that the best diet for you is one that works for you. And so if that is a diet that helps you achieve and maintain a healthy body weight, that's going to be better than being overweight or obese. As a dietitian, there are certain nutrients that are lacking in that type of diet. There haven't been very long-term studies on the long-term health outcomes of a ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet came into existence really because there was nothing to treat epilepsy. And this was the only thing that was shown to help epileptic children. And it wasn't until probably the last 20 years that the ketogenic diet has really hit the mainstream as one of the weight loss strategies that are available to people. So people who do a ketogenic diet often lose body fat really rapidly, but you have to be in true ketosis for that to happen. So what happens is a lot of people think they can have a high-fat, high-protein diet, but then sneak and have, a candy bar here or there. You have to be in ketosis. And to be in ketosis means you can't even have some things like carrots and tomatoes. There's enough natural sugar and those types of things that can throw your body out of ketosis. So I think that's all I'd like to say about that. Thanks, Susan. I don't know
about
why.
that. I don't know nothing about that.
Thank you for your presentation today. When you were showing the studies about B12 and some of the other ones, were all those supplements or were some of them diet-based?
So all of the trials are largely dietary supplement based. There have been whole diet interventions, so some of the Mediterranean diet studies were whole diet interventions, but a lot of the cognitive function work centers around supplements because it's easy to give people a supplement and to see if there's specific effects, but and yes, we did coordinate our outfits for the blue zones while we're waiting for the next. This is our tribe, yes.
So I understand that in nutrition research, like a substitution model is often used, and you even mentioned earlier substituting a glass of milk instead of a soda. Do you see the same thing in physical activity research? And, for example, someone schedules 15 minutes in their day for activity, and they get tired of walking or get tired of whatever they're doing. Are there better activities to choose?
Good question, Derek. So I would piggyback with what Dr. Bailey said is whatever movement works for you is what you should totally do. So if it's simply standing up more while you're watching TV and that's what you start with, then start there. There are plenty of things that you can do in your office with resistance bands, going for a walk. If that ends up not something that you enjoy, we can try bike riding, bike share programs, swimming. There's all kinds of different options that you can try. I think the most important thing is to just start trying and see what works.
I even tell people to go to the bathroom on a different floor. So that's something you have to do. There's no getting out of that, to my knowledge. So walk to the third floor to go to the bathroom. At least you know you're getting something a couple of times a day. So I think that's our real take-home message, is really small incremental changes can build up over time. Mm-hmm.